This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're broadcasting from Le Bourget, Paris, France. From the COP21, the UN Climate Summit. We're here for the full 2 weeks. We end today's show with an update on the negotiations taking place here at the summit. On Monday, the Prime Minister of Tuvalu, Enele Sopoaga, said world leaders must prevent the world from warming more than 1.5 degrees Celsius or 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit.
The current warming, my country, Tuvalu, and many others like us in the Pacific, Caribbean, and the Indian Ocean, our future is already bleak. We must urgently cut greenhouse gases and dramatically transform the global economy to a renewable energy pathway. Any further temperature decrease beyond 1.5 degrees Celsius will spell the total demise of Tuvalu and other low-lying and island nations.
Joining us now is Nitin Sethi, Senior Associate Editor at the Business Standard in India. His recent piece is called US and EU Want Loss and Damage as a Toothless Tiger in Paris Agreement. Toothless tiger? Nitin, what exactly do you mean? You got a hold of documents that most people haven't seen.
Well, loss and damage as an issue refers to a couple of things. One, primarily it's been about that if you cannot adapt to inevitable climate change, what do countries do? They will suffer loss and damage, and will they be able to seek compensation? Will they be able to claim liability cases against countries which have not cut their emissions enough? Now, in this case, the US, particularly, and the Umbrella Group, and then supported by EU, they've come back and said, we want to make sure that in Paris, you actually forgo all your compensation rights in the future, saying you must explicitly say that you shall never ever ask for compensation hereafter.
Wait. So they're saying you can use the words loss and damage, the United States is saying, but only if you agree that you don't get compensation.
Absolutely. Now, that really means loss and damage is only a notional idea at the end of the day. You're looking at risk insurance at the best of the times that might come for some countries, but the poor countries can't afford insurance because the premiums are going to be so high. So consider the fact that if you have sea level change, no insurance company is going to insure you against sea level rise because almost a certainty. The risk levels are so high, the premiums are going to be so high, the poor countries can't afford it. So the only option they had in the long run was some hope that you would be compensated in different ways, and there could be liability charges where if the countries haven't cut their emissions enough, which causes the climate change, they should be paying for it. Now, US is saying we want to cut this off right away. We should never have a conversation about it hereafter.
So I think it's framed in the United States as a kind of, should the U.S. be charitable for those who are less able to take care of themselves in other parts of the world?
Well, I don't think it's about charity. You're paying compensation for the damage you've caused to your neighbor in some sense. You break somebody's fence, you set it up right. This is when you're destroying lives of people. You're paying them compensation for the fact that they'll never be able to live in their homelands perhaps thereafter. This is not charity. This is a completely different ballgame.
So what are these documents that you've gotten?
Well, the document is an offer that the US made informally to the G77 and other developing country groups, saying, this is loss and damage, I agree to this, but if you have this explicit one sentence saying you shall forgo all rights to compensation and liability.
President Obama met with small island nation presidents.
Yes.
Is this actually what he was telling them? We got the word. He said, I'm an island boy myself, right? Grew up in Hawaii and Indonesia.
Absolutely. Well, as for all countries, I think there's a big degree of game that they all play, a theatric that they play. Now, if you look at what happened after President Obama met these few countries, say Marshall Islands, St. Lucia, and others, each of them came out saying, well, we're working with the US for a language which is convenient to the US. Now, that actually signifies that there's a break even amongst what's called the Association of Small Island States, which comprises of Caribbean island states, those in the Pacific, those in the Indian Ocean and the African region. The Association of the island states are cracking away under the pressure from US. We've seen the Caribbean islands move away. In fact, we hear now that even Tuvalu is saying maybe we can live with the fact that we'll not have compensation. This has happened just about an hour ago where Tuvalu, behind closed doors, said we can look for language that, kind of makes you happy. Just don't say it so loudly. Say it in a polite fashion that we have a face saver at the end of the day.
You also talk about UN censorship. What is that?
Sorry, could you say that again?
Can you talk about UN censorship? What I mean is, we spoke to Yeb Sanyo the other day. Now he is a pilgrim who walked from Rome here to Paris, but he's not the chief climate negotiator for the Philippines as he was. He was pulled right before Lima, Peru, the last COP.
Absolutely.
What happens to climate negotiators who speak out?
I mean, if you remember, you can go back to Copenhagen, where you had Diaping Lumumba from Sudan, if you remember. He was the first one to talk about issues of apartheid, the way developing countries were being treated. We never saw him back in the negotiations thereafter. It's happened to Yeb Sanyo 2 years ago because he fought really hard to get loss and damage in when nobody else was standing up for it. He disappeared. In fact, so far, that Philippines had to walk away. Philippines was forced to move away from the like-minded developing countries because they were pretty strong. Now Philippines is part of the vulnerable countries group, where they actually don't have a stand on loss and damage anymore. This year again, if you remember a few days ago, the G77 chair, Ambassador Disiko from South Africa, she actually on record said, my country is getting phone calls saying take certain negotiators out of the talking rooms because they're being hardliners. And we've seen one of the key negotiators for the G77 group was Juan Hofmeister from Bolivia, and he's no more in the room anymore. And he's the key guy on loss and damage and adaptation.
Who's taking him out? Who's taking all these people out?
Nobody said who's taking them out, but clearly know in whose favor it is if you take these guys out. It's primarily the US and other developed countries. They're the only ones who make these calls to say these specific guys should be removed. And this is not the first time it's happened. If you remember Bernadette Mueller from Philippines, she doesn't come from the Philippines badge anymore. Again, Philippines been under pressure not to have these people who know the convention, who know the rules, who know the history of these negotiations.
Nitin